Hello to all my friends out there, those who subscribe to Word from the Bird. This is going to be a Q&A on Christians and celebrity culture. And while I definitely identify as a Christian, as most people around me tell me, I am definitely no celebrity. I've got maybe a lot of friends on the internet, but as someone very dear and close to me said to me that if there is a multiverse, in no possible universe are you, Michael, a celebrity. And I think that holds true. I think that holds true. But I do have some ideas about Christian celebrity culture, mostly pertaining to why it is an incredibly bad thing. And some of you have written to me with your own questions about Christian celebrity culture. First question from MVH, terrific initials, which is who does it well? Who are some Christian celebrities that you feel manage the limelight well while keeping the gospel central? Any themes surface in their lifestyles and choices? Yeah, I mean that's actually a hard one to answer because you always have to have a kind of conditional answer by saying things, well, look, as far as we know at the moment, person X seems to be someone who is in the limelight, pastors a big church, or is the president of a big organization, and they seem to be like a godly Christian man or woman, and they're doing okay. But the problem with saying that is, 2, 5, 10 years down the road, there could be some scandals. Turns out some things were covered up, some things were done that nobody knew about, or person X was living a double life. So any affirmation of a Christian figure in the public square who has a big following or a big audience or a big platform, that's always got to have a little bit of an asterisk to the extent of, well, as far as we know. So, who are some Christian celebrities who I think are doing it well? I'd have to say number one would be Tim Keller. Tim Keller is a pastor in New York City. He's Presbyterian. He's been a seminary professor. He's done, several things with his life. And he's sort of, one of the pastors that a lot of people look to for someone they want to emulate, for advice and guidance. And he doesn't seem to be, as far as I know, a douchebag. Okay, he seems to be a very genuine, down to earth man, a Christian man. He's got some good leaders that he's been cultivating around him. They've created a great network of the Redeemer Presbyterian churches. He's also a man who's currently suffering through some terrible health issues with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. But we wish him well and every blessings and every health and healing as he goes through that. But as far as I know, Tim Keller is a guy who seems to be doing pretty good. And I certainly hope there's going to be nothing coming out in a few years of something that he was doing. But I think what Keller has is he has a sense of humility. And one thing you got to remember, Keller did not write his first book until he was 50 years old. Okay, so this was not some youth leader in his early 20s writing his first book. He was a mature Christian leader by the time he started his writing ministry, and the success he's had in ministry have come for him in the second half of his life, if you like. And I think that's important. If you're given all this success, power, prestige, and esteem, and you surround yourself with your entourage of sycophants, and you're only like 23 or 28, that I think it's more likely to go to your head. I think if you're a little bit older in life, you've probably got a little bit more perspective. You've got a little bit more sobriety, and you know that nothing is permanent and everything can be tenuous. And you know as well, often through mistakes or from what you've seen around you, the importance of character and conviction. As Rick says, he says, look, this is a good question, but should we avoid painting with too broad a brush? That's probably true. I mean, there are some people who are in the limelight who are under a lot of pressure and they seem to perform reasonably well. But it could be the danger that we think, well, anyone who's popular, anyone who's famous, deep down somewhere, somehow has got to be a deviant. And we may not want to think the worst of people automatically, or assume that if they are successful, therefore they got there through subterfuge, bullying, harassment, that type of a thing. But at the same time, I'm reminded of some famous words by the Scottish pastor Robert Murray McShane, who said something that's always stuck with me. It's always stuck with me. And that is, the best of men are men at best. And I think that is well worth remembering, well worth remembering. All human beings are fallible. We really can believe in total depravity. All of us can have a lack of humility. All of us can be greedy, selfish, lustful, be tempted by the allure of gold, glory, girls, whatever you want to call it. All of us are just one bad decision away from being in some kind of a scandal, whether you're a megachurch pastor or you're a youth leader in a congregation of 45 people, something like that. All of us can become our own, dare I say, all of us can become our own Rabbi Zacharias if we're put in the right or wrong situation. Another question from Tim Knight. Tim says, it's easy for Christian leaders with a microphone and a spotlight to think that they are all that and a bag of chips. What spiritual practice do you do, or would you recommend a leader consistently does, practicing to mitigate that false narrative? That's a very good question. How do you stop yourself becoming, let's say you've got some sort of ministry. I mean, it could be anything, could be non-denominational. It could be parachurch ministry. It could be, a book you write or a blog post you get that starts to become, successful and that type of thing. And people come to you and treat you well and want your opinion on things. Or, you become a very successful pastor or minister or whatever it is. How do you avoid becoming that celebrity? And I mean, it's easy to give some, pretty simple advice, like pray a lot, read your Bible a lot. There's all sorts of things. But I would say the two most important things is don't surround yourself with sycophants and yes men. Okay. And I know people who have been in some very big, prominent churches in the United States. They've been on staff. And they've told me that there is the leader, and the purpose of an eldership or the diaconate or the board is just to nod agreeingly when the leader speaks. And if anyone challenges the leader, it says, actually, Pastor Tim or Pastor Angela, that's a really bad idea. Or I'm not too sure that's really fulfilling all righteousness. Or that's not a wise thing to do. Anyone who stands up to the leader gets thrown out the door. And I think that's the number one thing. Make sure you've got people who are willing to say, you know what, Pastor John or Pastor Kate, I don't think we should be doing this. I think this is a bad idea. Or, the way you spoke to that deacon, I think was needlessly harsh. And you shouldn't have said those things. You shouldn't have said. You need people who are willing to challenge you and stand up to you. Because if you've got this little Praetorian guard around you who protects you from critique and accountability, and they're just there to worship you and to lead others in the worship of you, that is a very unhealthy leadership culture where the leader is treated like a, semi-divine being, or treated as a person who cannot be challenged or questioned, who is, in effect, infallible. That is not healthy. The other thing I think is very important is to have a mentor, to have someone that you meet with, that you look up to. Now, this could be just, a normal mentor. It could be a parent figure. It could be someone like a spiritual director, someone you sit down with and you pour out the desires of your heart, because, we know that pastors do find it hard to have friends, particularly friends within the congregation, because you can be perceived as playing favorites. And you're also trying to, pastor these people, care for them spiritually when they're going through the ups and downs of life. So friendship for pastors is difficult. So having a mentor, and someone who is going to, say like, whoa, you're being an absolute schmuck. Okay, you need to drop the attitude. you're complaining against things, you have no right to complain. People who have challenged you or criticized you are not necessarily trying to destroy you. Not all criticism is a vicious attack trying to bring you down. Sometimes people who criticize you, they're trying to stop you going in a bad direction or cultivating a bad culture. I think that's probably the two things I would say is making sure you're not surrounded by sycophants and yes men, and having a good mentor, a good father or mother figure that's going to listen to you and will, if necessary, tap you on the shoulder and say you might need a personality readjustment because you're heading into a really, really dark place. Another question from Gabe Rodriguez. Gabe asks, Christian celebrities often arise out of a megachurch context. Given the frequent negative consequences and lack of biblical evidence for churches of this size, can we assume that churches should not pursue sizes larger than 150, with the assumption that this produces fewer Christian celebrities? Yeah, is it megachurch the problem? Well, on the one hand, you could say that most Christian celebrities are megachurch pastors who have behaved or gone badly. But, there's a lot of big churches out there where they're doing quite a good job, where the leaders are humble, gifted and godly, which is exactly what you need. So I wouldn't necessarily say that having a big church itself is the problem, because what's the definition of a big church? I mean, let me tell you, in Australia, a church of 400 is considered a big church. Okay, if you've got a church of 400 people, that's considered kind of booming. Whereas I think in the United States, that's considered a fairly, on the big end of a small church. Okay, but if you've got 400 people in Australia, I mean, that's almost mega church. And once you hit 1,000, you are basically, in Australia, you can be considered a mega church. And of the 20 largest churches in Australia, I think about 19 of them are Pentecostal as well. I mean, that's another interesting significance for something that's very different between Australia and the United States. So I wouldn't necessarily say having a big church is the problem, but it definitely can be more conducive to some of these problems. And you do have to ask the question, if you've got a church of 10,000 people, are you really pastoring? I mean, can anyone really pastor them? To be honest, if you've got a church of 10,000 people, you're not really a pastor. You're more like, well, in Episcopal terms, you're more like a bishop. Okay, you're really having oversight over a number of probably multi-site churches, and you're more likely to be someone who's providing vision and direction, providing strategic leadership and a moral compass, and then you're pastoring other pastors. That's probably what you're doing if you're in a church of 10,000. If you think of it that way, it's not so bad. But obviously, a person who's in charge of a congregation or congregations of 10,000 people is having a different role and a different type of ministry compared to someone who's looking after a church of 75 to 150. So yeah, I'm not inclined to say that the mega church itself is the problem, but it's definitely a contributing factor, and it's definitely conducive to some of the things we've seen wrong with celebrity Christian culture when it gets down to its very worst. In terms of what else we could say about Christianity and celebrity culture, we just have to recognize that celebrity culture, it's not Christian. It goes against the very idea of humility, of making much of Christ and less of yourself. Now, that's not to say that leaders should not be respected or held in higher esteem. I mean, Paul in Philippians, he says, people like Epaphroditus, I mean, these people should be held in honor for their sacrifice, their hard work, but honor and respect and kind of putting them on a pedestal and worshiping them and treating them like a Hollywood superstar, I think that's a bad idea. And I'm going to write an article this week. I think it's coming out tomorrow, tonight, depending where you are in the world, why we should get rid of the green room and replace it with a vestry. Because when you're getting ready to lead people in worship of their great God and Jesus Christ, you're not like a Hollywood superstar getting ready to go on stage. You should be a person of prayer and a person of various kind of habits of holiness, getting ready to lead people in the ministry to which you have been called. So that's pretty much what I would say on the topic of Christians and celebrity culture.